it's great to see you all. I know some of you, I met you the other day, I think. You came up to Korsnesgard. Thank you. And others I know from 7 years ago. I think it was last time I was here. Is that true? I have no concept of time spans. It's hard to tell. Which I guess is good, right? Time flies when you're having fun. And I just was so inspired when a group of young people from here came over the other day, and I sensed something very special going on here. I'm leaving tomorrow. I've been at meetings in Korsnesgard for the last 4 or 5 days, and thought I'd sneak over here. Earlier we had a meeting in the office where we talked about some of the ways in which Srila Prabhupada encouraged the organization of Sankirtan and outreach in general. And just as a review, some of my guiding principles in that matter are what Prabhupada said to Karandar Prabhu. He said you should create an environment in which devotees do service that's individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. And by the way, I come from California. I was born in the Bay Area near San Francisco. I joined the Hare Krishna movement there. After that, of course, joined the Hare Krishna to see the world. I spent a lot of time in various places around the world, but I ended up back there. I joined in 1973, was a brahmachari till 1986, and been a grihastha for, I guess, 36 years. And why did I bring that up? Interrupted myself. So we have a temple, that's where I was going. We have a community there that I stumbled upon living in the Bay Area. Some devotees came up and started a little project in a house. There were these beautiful Radha Krishna deities inside a tiny little house, and a few brahmacharis. And they asked me, to come and consult. And so that's what we started, what is now called ISKCON of Silicon Valley. So that's ISV. But behind that is our mission statement, which is individual, spontaneous, and voluntary, ISV. Really, legally on paper, it's ISKCON of Silicon Valley. So Prabhupada's management directive was make an environment in which devotees want to do service. That's individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. And then he said, always create a fresh challenge so that devotees will want to rise up and meet it. Create a fresh challenge so they want to rise up and meet it. And you can do a lot with those too. And I can say now that we've had growth there at ISV, and we have an environment that's pleasing. And so I sense that here, just a lively environment, and there's elders here, there's young people, a beautiful setting, and I've heard a lot about your accomplishments here. We were discussing some of the history of the organization when we were in the office, and looking at the glorious past of this place. So, all that to say, I'm really happy to be here. And thank you for all you're doing, all of you together. It's changing the world. And when you concentrate your energies together and follow the orders of Krishna coming down through the Guru Parampara, then you're doing something that is good for all living entities. And it's very glorious. So let's see if anybody has any questions that you'd like to ask about anything. Yes?
I want to know, what's your favorite memory with Srila Prabhupada?
My favorite memory with Srila Prabhupada was first with his Vani. As I was a young seeker, as far as I can remember, I had questions that my parents couldn't answer. One of the main ones was, why do I have to die? And what's life for if you have to die anyway? And when I got into my teens and into high school, I had a sense of existential angst. I really wanted to know more, so I started studying literatures that seemed to me to be spiritual, anything I could find, from the library, from bookstores, from wherever. And I was eclectic at that point because I didn't have a clear direction. And then one day, a friend of mine from high school, I was in junior high school at the time, and he, my friend Richie Corsa, had been walking on the street in Berkeley, California, near the UC Berkeley campus. And a devotee had sold him a magazine called Back to Godhead. And Richie wasn't interested in it, but he knew I would be, because anything spiritual, that was for me. So he brought it over to my house and gave me the magazine. And when I read that, it clarified everything. It brought together everything I was reading that had some contradiction. Seemed to me there were lots of contradictions, and that wasn't clear, didn't feel complete. Suddenly came, as you'll hear an orchestra warming up, and there's a cacophony of sounds, and then suddenly there's clear note. It felt like that for me. And I realized when I looked at the Back to Godhead magazine, there was a culture, there was an organization, a society, and there were young people like me. And they were happily engaged in service. And I just thought, I want to do that. That's what I want to be. So when I read in that magazine that there were books to be had, I researched it. Actually, my mother did, and she found a bookstore in Berkeley. We lived near Berkeley, called Shambhala Books. So she drove me over there. And I went in and I told them I want anything by the author, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And they had Bhagavad Gita as it is. They had Sri Upanishad and On the Way to Krishna. Paperback Bhagavad Gita was a big version. It was very large, but it was paperback. And then the Sri Upanishad was hardback. And there was another paperback, On the Way to Krishna. So I read all those, and that's when I first felt that I met Prabhupada, because everything he said, I had read the Bhagavad Gita and was reading it repeatedly. It was just the translations. But when I heard his voice through his purports, I was so impressed. I thought, now I'm being guided properly. And many of the verses that I had misinterpreted in my head, I then saw that, oh, there's more to this. And I had become a vegetarian on my own when I was younger, because I just thought suddenly it occurred to me that it was barbarism occurring in my own house. I had protested earlier, but I couldn't quite defeat my mother in argument. But then finally, when I was an adolescent, no mas, that's it. And then when Prabhupada talked about nonviolence and how you can't kill animals and also be spiritual, I thought, okay, everything's here. So that's the first time. And when I came to the temple, that was in San Francisco, I got confirmation of that meeting through Vani, because my future godbrother Janakanath Prabhu was sitting on the steps of the temple. When I walked in, he was chanting. And I asked, is the Guru here? Because I want to surrender, that I said to him. I just assumed he'd be there. And he kind of chuckled and he said, no, he's not here. He's in India. He said, but he said, don't worry, he's present in his books. And I thought, I like this place, because I already felt that presence in his books. And so I felt very confident walking in. And then when Prabhupada did come to San Francisco, which he did a few times, I saw everyone's reaction, and I had the same reaction, which was that he was carrying the spiritual banner on behalf of Krishna. And that was a favorite. I mean, I'd have to say, starting there, there are other things I can say, that I saw this, I sat here, Prabhupada said this, and so forth, but just that overwhelming time of discovering myself, discovering my path, without any doubt, through Prabhupada's books. And now, when I'm able to go distribute books, if someone says, I'm not interested in this, that's okay, it's not for you. Because I know Richie Corsa, it wasn't for him. And nowadays, I barely ever see Richie. But the last time I talked to him, he said, he calls me by my old name, Willie. He said, I'll probably never do anything significant in my life. But at least I know I did one good thing. I made you a Hare Krishna. I brought you the book. And so whenever I'm distributing a book to anybody, I think, yeah, I don't know who it's for, but if the person says I won't read it or I'm not interested, it's like, that's all right. Richie said the same thing. You should keep it. And I also, when I see those who are seekers, who it's when they connect, their eyes light up when they even see the covers, and they recognize that somebody's organized some spiritual knowledge here and put it in a book. Humans love books. They just love them because we have this potency where we want to learn and grow. So that's why, if you ever notice, I started noticing during the pandemic, everyone had a bookcase behind them. Even if they had a virtual backdrop, it was like books. And I think, humans really like books, don't they? And so, when seekers, anybody even has a little spark of inquiry about what's the purpose of life, when they see these books like this, these are not ordinary, and I watch their eyes light up, I vicariously experience what it was like for me the first time. And that's, to me, the best kind of experience. And we can do it over and over again. It keeps me alive, that experience, seeing them. Appreciate it. So, meeting Prabhupada was like feeling like winning the lottery. Because he knew exactly, he knew that he was empowered, and he was humble at the same time. And he just presented it straightforwardly, without any equivocation. And I was looking for that. I really needed it. And still do. So I felt that impact immediately. Thank you for your question. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu. Any questions are allowed, as long as they're good ones. And we'll give what's the name of your money here? Kroner? How much is 100 kroner? Is that worth anything? $10. We give 1,000 kroner if you can ask a bad question. I'll be the judge, though. Okay. Yes, Prabhu, please go ahead.
Saying that we should arrange proper conditions work for devotees.
I'll have to repeat because there's people online who probably want to hear this. Can you understand what she's saying?
How could you explain what means to create proper conditions for Vaishnavas?
Conditions.
Yeah, like
How can we create a good environment for Vaishnavas? Oh, what a nice question that is. Yeah, the way I like to think of conditions, there's a word, habitat. Does anybody know that word, habitat? It's usually described with animals, they can survive in a particular habitat. Once in California, near where I live, whereas a place I hike sometimes, it's by the ocean, and I saw that the government had a project to restore the habitat of the red-legged frog, which was an important link in the ecological chain, and it had almost gone extinct. So they spent millions of dollars to create these little tiny ponds, and they created the flora and fauna where these frogs survive. And after they did that, the frog came back. And I was thinking about how every human also has a particular habitat that he or she feels natural and can survive in. In general, there has to be an environment of love and trust. And Srila Prabhupada writes in his commentary to Rupa Goswami's statement, Upadeshamrita, Dadati pratigranati kuhyamakyati prachiti bhukte bojayate chaiva shadvidam pratilaksharam. He describes, does Rupa Goswami, 6 loving exchanges between devotees. Does anybody know what they are? 1, give the first 2. Yeah, okay. You get, in order, the Dadati Pratigranati means giving gifts and accepting gifts. Does anybody like gifts? But not very much. Just and only 2 people like it?
We're Swedish, that's how we express extreme enthusiasm.
But that's okay. Well, only you're the one to say. Well, I'll give you a gift then. Here, give me one of these. She's the only one that said, When that blue thing, that blue bag. Here. Can you let me out? Just for you. Hare Krishna. All of Krishna's energies are cooperative. As mentioned, Prarasha Shaktir Vibhadai Vashriyate Subhavika Jnana Bala Kriya Cha. This is a verse from the Shastra that mentions various kinds of energies. There's actually only one thing. Advaya Gyan Tattva means there's one thing. Advaya, there's not 2. Dvaya means 2. Advaya means there's only one thing. Advaya Gyan Tattva. So Srimad Bhagavatam is speaking about one thing, which is Krishna, but Krishna has many varieties. Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam gyaj gyanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Within the oneness, there's variety. And the varieties are Krishna's Shaktis. And they have various qualities. And Krishna has manifested himself as Srimati Radharani, who then expands herself into the wives in Dwarka, Krishna's wives in Dwarka, and then also into the Lakshmis in Vaikuntha. And then we have Durga, which is also an expansion coming from Krishna. And then we have Balaram, who's an expansion from Krishna. Balaram is in charge of Sandhini potency, where he provides all kinds of services for Krishna. The very structure of the spiritual world is provided by Balaram. And then, of course, he expands into the Chaturvyuha, and then into Mula Sankarsana, and the second Chaturvyuha, and then into the Purushas, who then give facility for the Shrishti Lila, or the manifestation of the material world, from Mahavishnu, then Garbhadakshay Vishnu, then Shirdakshay Vishnu, and then of course there's Shesha, which means the remainder They're all Balaram. They're expansions of Balaram. And Shesha means the remainder, because he does all the service for Krishna. In the spiritual world, he's his Brahman's thread, his shoes, his bed, the canopies that shield him from the sun, his umbrella, everything. And then in the material world, all the facility is created by the expansions of Balaram and the Purushas. This is all explained in the Mangalacharna of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Shesha, as I was just mentioning, means anything that's left over, he'll take that too. And then, of course, all the living entities are expansions from Sankarshana. And they're also energies that are meant to serve Krishna. And they enjoy in serving Krishna. Srimati Radharani is the personification of the Hladini Shakti, the pleasure-giving potency for Krishna. Because Radha Krishna pranaya vikritir Hladini Shakti rasma ekatmanav api bhuvipura dehabedham katau tau chaitanyakyam prakaramaduna tadvayam shaikyamatam Radha bhava dutu suvalitam naumi Krishna sarupam. Krishna is one, but he manifests himself as two for his eternal enjoyment. And the mission of Balaram, who then becomes Nitai, Balaram Hoilo Nitai, says Narottam Das Thakur. That Balaram, who's the first expansion of Krishna, his intimate servitor, who has the attitude of service towards Krishna, manifest as Sri Nityananda Prabhu in Lord Chaitanya's pastime. And he becomes the servant of Lord Chaitanya, in that he brings out to the world the glories of Lord Chaitanya. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gathered his Sankirtan party together and he asked everyone to go door to door and teach everyone, Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koto Krishna Shikha. He said, teach everyone to chant Hare Krishna. And Lord Nityananda told everyone, not like that. You go teach them to chant Gauranga. Because they said, he is Krishna. Nitai is the one, the guru who reveals to everyone what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's identity is. And of course, Lord Nityananda is known as a dosha darshi. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is especially merciful to the conditioned souls. In fact, it's mentioned by Karabhajana Muni in the 11th canto that Maya mrigam dayate ipsitam anbadavad. He chases after them in Kali Yuga. And anybody who's willing to take to Krishna conscious, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will accept them. And then Lord Nityananda, he goes after the ones who are unwilling to take to Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada mentions in a lecture that in order to attain the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you have to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda. You can see that in the story of Raghunath Das Goswami. He tried to run away from his family and join Lord Chaitanya, but he wasn't successful until he went and met Lord Nityananda Mahaprabhu, who benedicted him and put his lotus feet on Raghunath's head. He first met them. Raghunath was standing at a distance, and Nityananda called him over and said, "You are a thief. You're trying to stay away from me." And he grabbed him and he forcefully put his lotus feet on his head. After that, Raghunath Das Goswami was able to emancipate himself from his overly possessive family, to say the least. He's like the prisoner there. And he was able to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so he expanded that. He expands Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's circle of devotees by bringing more and more in and by revealing the divinity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's the one who reveals it to everyone. Srimati Radharani, as Prabhupada has explained, is the compassionate counterpart of Krishna. He says we don't ever approach Krishna directly, but if we bring something to Srimati Radharani and offer it to her, and she offers it to Krishna, and Krishna will accept it. And whenever we chant Krishna's names, we preface his name with the name of his compassionate counterpart. Hare Krishna means, oh my Lord, oh energy of the Lord, but we're saying Hare first, approaching through her. So Krishna's outreach happens especially through his devotees. And Srimati Radharani is one who especially accepts service on behalf of Krishna and offers it to him. Lord Nityananda is also a missionary for Krishna in that he enlivens the devotees to reach out to all the fallen souls and to not consider whether they're fit or unfit, but to give them an opportunity to come to the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. The tattvas are slightly different because Srimati Radharani is Hladini Shakti. And of course, we know that Balaram and Srimati Radharani, as far as rasa goes, they don't stay on the same altar. In other words, when we have Radha and Krishna, and we also don't have Nityananda on the same altar, but on a separate altar because there's a difference in feeling. And that's esoteric and can be explained in terms of rasa, but that's the principle. The overall point is that the material world, the Srishti Leela of Krishna, as explained in the prayers by the personified Vedas, is one of Krishna's pastimes. In fact, they say it's the most glorious of all Krishna's pastimes because what is that pastime? It's rescuing the eternally conditioned souls and bringing them back to the spiritual world. And there has to be an agency for that. An agency of those who reach out to the conditioned souls and give them an opportunity. So the spiritual master, those who teach on behalf of Krishna, they're known to be expansions of Lord Balaram. He's the Samasti Guru. And then he's the principal of Guru. Srimati Radharani is the one who is the most expert at serving Krishna and through whom devotees offer their service to Krishna. So all are working when they come to the material world as agents in order to fulfill Krishna's ultimate desire, which is to give everyone a chance to enter back into his service. Because Krishna's the supreme enjoyer, and he enjoys receiving the service and reciprocating it of all his devotees. So those who represent him have their parts in extending themselves to the fallen souls in this world. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Okay, we just have time for a couple more questions. Yes?
So, I was wondering, from the outside perspective, it would seem like devotees?
She's asking that from an outside perspective, it seems.
Like devotees and non-devotees.
Like devotees and non-devotees
Suffer equally much.
suffer equally much.
Or even that the devotee
Or even that the devotee
suffer a lot and the non-devotee has.
who suffer more than a non-devotee.
Yeah, that the non-devotee would seemingly have a perfect life.
A non-devotee would seemingly have a perfect life.
But actually we hear that it isn't the same.
But actually we hear that it isn't the same.
Because Krishna is supposed to have our back.
Because Krishna is supposed to have our backs.
And our suffering is only a way for us to get closer.
And suffering is only a way for us to get closer.
Let's look at it superficially.
So we shouldn't look at it superficially.
But it feels impossible.
But it feels impossible.
Because the pain is so real.
Because the pain is very real. What a nice question. Thank you for asking that. The pain of the material world is described by Kapila Dev in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam as a dreamlike state. He says that in a dream you may see your heads being cut off, and then you suffer because that's a very gruesome scene. Of course, he also points out that if your head's being cut off, then you don't really see much because your optical nerve will be disjointed and so forth. I won't get into the details. So, even though it's illusory, the suffering is real. If somebody's sleeping and they're having that dream, it's horrifying for them to go through that. And therefore, they suffer in that illusion. When one wakes up from a dream, then there's a sense that, oh, I feel relief because that was a dreamlike state. Not a dreamlike state, it was a dream. And I was suffering because of my perception of something that was temporary. And I wasn't affected the way I thought I was being affected. If one is aware that the material world is here today and gone tomorrow, as Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparsha sukonteya shitoshna sukadukada agama paino nityastam stikshashva bharata. If you have this, even on a very superficial level, I can say when the pandemic first started, we had started immediately a podcast because we were preparing for it for a while. Then when lockdown happened, we said, now's a good time. And I remember the first few sessions when people weren't sure if the whole population of the world was going to live or die. At least that's what I perceived from the audience. And I gave a really simple message. One of the first ones we talked about was, this too shall pass, which is really the message of Matra Sparsha Stukonteya. And people really appreciated it. They wanted some relief. And it came from that very simple statement that this too shall pass. And those who cultivate Krishna consciousness, although it's true, they're subjected to the same kinds of changes that take place for everybody, because we are souls living in a changing environment that we're incompatible with. We're permanent and we're very subtle, but matter is always changing. In fact, the whole material world is called bhava. Bhava means that which is becoming something else right before your eyes. And when we have the perspective that this too shall pass, we're able to not suffer. Suffer actually means, the word means that when something happens to you, you hold on to it. That's actually, if you look at the etymology of the word, it means what you're holding on to. Yes, the same things happen, and it looks like there's inconvenience for devotees and for non-devotees. The inconvenience is caused by the incompatibility we have with the material world. But if you have a perspective that this is the normal way the material world works, that it's always changing, it's never the same. And you also have a sense of yourself, which is above the material fray, in other words, we're witnesses of what's going on in the world, then you don't suffer in the same way as when you consider that everything about your life in this world is a permanent reality and you like to keep it that way. That causes the greatest kind of consternation, which is almost euphemistic to say consternation. It's not strong enough words. However, those who have the vision of eternity that we're just passing through, even on that level, those who are enlightened to that degree, who think that, oh, I'm just temporarily here, and if you take it a step further with the verse in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 8, do you know what verse that is? Tate nukampam susamikshamano unjana evatmakritam vivakam. That's a verse spoken by Lord Brahma, and he said that if you're able to see the world as a cosmic schoolhouse, and that everything that happens to you is meant to teach you something, to bring you to a higher level of consciousness, that's different than a different experience of the world than if you think that I'm supposed to get comfortable here. So a lot of the indoctrination we get from, for instance, advertising, is that you should be able to find a niche here where you could be happy. Has anybody ever noticed that? There's kind of a propaganda of you can be happy here in the material world. Like Coca-Cola. I don't know what their advertising is now, but they had an ad for a long time that says, pour out a bottle of happiness. That's deliberate. There's a sense that you can be happy doing this. It's sugar water, really. A little bit of flavor. I don't know what that flavor is, but it's not great. And then there's a few other chemicals in it. But that's definitely not a bottle of happiness, but there's an orientation that somebody might have that the material world's a happy place. But samsara dhavanada vidaloka trinaya karunya ganaganaton. That's saying the material world's actually kind of a disaster area. There's a fire going on here burning everything to the ground. And first of all, the premise that people are happy who are materialistically oriented isn't really true, because people everywhere have the same kinds of inconveniences from the material nature. And you might suffer more when your expectation is that one of these days I'm going to get comfortable here in the material world. But let's say you get on a train, probably gave this example, and you're just about to sit down. You don't have a reserved seat, it's on a reserved car. And the last seat was there and you're going for it, but somebody sits in it before you. And you got 3 hours to go. He said, you get in a fight. I've seen that happen. Sweltering night in South India when I was waiting for a train, and people actually got in a fight on the train stand because they were annoyed with one another. But Prabhupada said, if you just tolerate and say like, hey, it's only 3 hours, then it's not really a disturbing event for you. In the whole material world, if you have that vision of eternity, that I'm just passing through, what's more, whatever happens to me in this world teaches me a lesson if I'm able to ask the question, what's the lesson behind this? That's the essence of the verse, Tate nukampam susamikshamano. Now, as far as, the appearance of people enjoying in the material world, the appearance, Prabhupada talks about when Lord Nrsingadev is fighting Hiranyakashipu. Do you know about this fight? Well, in the fight, there's an interesting section where Lord Nrsingadev lets Hiranyakashipu go. You live on a farm, have you ever seen a cat catch a mouse? You've seen it? Does it just sit down and devour it, or does it play around with it for a while? I grew up around cats. I've seen it so many times. They're like, all right, you can go. It's like, no, not so fast. Come back here. It'll go for like an hour. It's like, no, it's okay. All right. So Prabhupada explains how Lord Nrsimhadev, he's part cat, right? He's half lion. So he let Hiranyakashipu go. And there's a couple things that happened. One was that the demigods who were observing the whole thing got frightened because they knew that Hiranyakashipu could see that they were rooting for the enemy. And now if he was going to lose, if Nrsimhadev was not going to be able to defeat their captor and their oppressor, then they would be more oppressed after that. So they were afraid. And then everyone thought, oh, he's more powerful than they thought. Hiranyakashipu has gotten free now. So Prabhupada explains there, he says that sometimes we observe materialistic people and we think, oh, they seem to be yucking it up and having fun and they're okay. And maybe for a little while, but he said it's only material nature, just letting them have a sense of this freedom in the material world, but they'll be recaptured again. We're all already in the grip of material nature. So there's an illusory sense that I can be happy in the world, but actually when devotees have the perspective of what the real purpose of the world is, and they also have a sense of not expecting much from the material nature, because it's a very uncomfortable place by nature. It's called Dukhalayam. Have you been to India? Yeah? Did you ever hear of the Bhojanalaya? If you're ever hungry and you don't have much money, you can go get a few rotis, a few chapatis, a little sabji, maybe a tiny little chutney for a rupee or something like that at the Bhojanalaya, because they feed everybody at the Bhojanalaya. Alaya means a place. So does anybody know what dukkha means? So Krishna says the material world is dukkhalaya. So what does that mean? It's a place where he gets suffering and it's meted out across the board. In fact, those who have some sense of being comfortable in the material world, let's say somebody gets wealthy. It's well known that wealthy people suffer greatly because once you get wealth or fame, you still feel empty. I saw online a while back a whole collection of famous rich people who were saying, there's nothing here. I remember George Harrison and the Beatles, they were so young and they got so famous and rich so fast. And then they just said, there's nothing here. The famous comedian, he's a Canadian, I think, his name is Jim Carrey. Everyone talks about, his making $20 million. He wrote a check to himself for $20 million and then he earned that in a movie part and then he earned, 10 times that afterwards. And his statement was, and has been consistently, I hope everyone has the experience of getting rich and famous so they can see there's nothing in it. There's no happiness in it. And there really isn't, because the soul can't be satisfied by any arrangement in the material world. So devotees know that, and even though they go through the same kinds of things externally as everybody else, they feel okay. They can tolerate it. And they can process whatever happens to them by understanding what reality is and that this too shall pass. And then actually Krishna is there to protect them. And as you get older and you see things come and go, like both my parents are gone, I always wondered what it would feel like when my parents left the world and how I'd be able to tolerate it. Even though I'd been practicing Krishna consciousness for so many years, I wasn't sure. But after they passed, one after another, a year apart, I got to find out for myself. And although it's seemingly, at least it was for me, it was a very emotional experience. When my father passed, I was in Vrindavan, and I got the news. And then it took me a while to adjust to that. And then I was with my mother when she left. And it's a long story, which we won't go into, but it was very life-changing in that I could see after they left that it was an arrangement by Krishna for me to have parents in the first place. I mean, who else is going to arrange that? And after they left, I had a sense that they were only masks of Krishna in this world taking care of me. And so when you have the experiences as you go through life and you process them through your experience of Krishna's teachings and so forth, then you start to develop this vision of eternity. It just becomes part of you in the way you live. And it's not philosophical. It's not just theoretical, I should say. It actually becomes the way you live and the way you think and the way you process everything. So Krishna consciousness is holistic, and if you live your life in it, you'll have that experience. But there's one thing guaranteed: you can never be happy in the material world. We want love. And the real deep love, the eternal love, is with Krishna. First car I ever bought, I read up on it, how to buy a car. And some of the good advice I read, first thing I thought, don't love the car won't love you back. And that goes for the whole material world. But Krishna will love you back, and that's what we want. If you learn to love Krishna, amazingly, in all our imperfection, He'll love us back and He'll give us all support. That's all He does, constantly. And so you can do that. You're in a really good position because it seems like you've grown up in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, and also it's natural when you grow up in Krishna consciousness to get to a certain point where you have an internal conflict. Is this me, or is it momentum from my family and everything like that? I know this very well because I grew up, I've been at ISKCON of Silicon Valley since 1999. So how many years is that now? 25. Oh, it's not that much, but anyway, it's something. It's long enough that I grew up, I watched all the kids grow up there. I knew them when they were babies, and then I knew them when they were young adolescents and so forth, and now many of them are through college. And I watched the cycle. And I can tell you a couple incidents, like my wife and I had some of the young people over to our house. Am I way over? I am, aren't I? Typical. My wife was here, she would have cut me off like 20 minutes, half an hour ago. What?
There's no limit.
There's no minimum, and more importantly, there's no maximum. We say that on Sankirtan. How much should I give? Listen, there's no minimum. But more importantly, there's no maximum. You just give what you can. Some people give their whole lives. You just give what you can. Anyway, I had kids over, and I was really surprised because we were talking to them and just having this sharing session, and they were talking about their realizations. And two of them in the group, maybe there was about 7 of them there, and these are like really the cream of the crop. And 2 of them said, and they were just being really honest, and they said, well, one of them said, I'm not sure I actually want to be a devotee. I haven't figured that out yet. And then the other one said something similar too. And I thought about that a lot for days, weeks, months, discuss it with my wife, like, well, that was a surprise. And we were appreciative that they were so open and honest. And then as we continued with them, we're really a tight-knit community there, and we started this program taking young people to the Dham. We have what's a youth yatra program we do annually. So we took a lot of these kids, and those two were there in that, amongst dozens of others. And afterwards, after the whole thing was over and we were back in America and we were talking about it, I said, yeah, I decided I want to be a devotee. I said, what was it? And he said, it was Tota Gopinath. We were in Puri, right down the street from Tota Gopinath, the really beautiful manifestation of Krishna. I mean, when he looks at you, you go like, whoa. And one of them said, yeah, I saw his eyes, and that just changed my heart. And I'll tell you another story, since we got all night. No, I'm just kidding. I'll stop in a couple of minutes. But I was really trying to figure this whole thing out about young people and what makes them tick. Because I'm kind of a young person at heart. I joined when I was 16. So, I'm trying to figure out how young people can survive in Krishna consciousness. So I was interviewing different people. One of the people I interviewed was Johnny V. Harrison, who now lives at ISV nearby. But I had called her and I had a long talk with her because I heard her reflections about her life, memories of Prabhupada or something like that. And she told how when she was in her teens, or somewhere around there, that she also wasn't sure if she wanted to be a devotee or not. But her parents took her to Sharanagati, which is kind of a counterpart. You know Sharanagati Farm? It's in Vancouver, but it's like this, I think. I've never been there. But it's an eco... And she met with Jamuna. And the family spent a couple days there. And Jamuna was so nurturing towards Janavi. And just giving her attention, genuine care and attention. And always singing prayers and encouraging her to sing because she's a natural singer. And so she said in that interview that when they were on their way home, she got in the car with her parents, sitting in the back seat, they were driving away, and she thought, I want to be like that. That I want to be like her. I want to be like Jamuna. And she said her heart changed. So there was a point at which, she saw the transformation. So there's a way that if we can stay close to the fire of Krishna consciousness, that the heart can develop and we'll have full realization and especially as you go through the different eras of your life and you process everything through Krishna consciousness, then when you get old, when I turned, I forget, I know how old I am, but I didn't forget that. I can still count. But I think when I turned 60 or something, I was sitting with Indra Dhruva. She goes, 60? Okay, that's the youth of old age. That's great. At least I have another youth going on here. But there's a way that things, if you stick to Krishna consciousness throughout the different periods of your life, then there's a complete transformation that takes place for you by Krishna's arrangement. And all you have to do is stay close. And even if you don't stay close, you'll, one way or another, like people who go away from Krishna consciousness, they get Krishna's mercy in another way. It just takes them longer. Because the whole material world is kind of a, cooking process. Samsara davanadalita loka. You get cooked on the vine by the intensity of the material world, or you can jump into the internal energy. I have a few gifts for the devotees here. I hope I have enough of them. Otherwise, I'll make sure that you get more. If you don't, the kind of bag that I gave you, it has a little logo on the side that says, assume it can be done. That's one of our mottos that we adopted during the pandemic, as I realized that, and by the way, in the pandemic, regarding book distribution, that was the biggest spike in history of an increase in book distribution worldwide we've ever experienced in that short amount of time. And it started off with, in January, February, March of 2020, with most people, most devotees all over the world saying, well, we definitely can't distribute books. And when we were able to develop this awareness that we can afford to assume it can be done, because Lord Chaitanya is the one writing the checks. He's a spiritual venture capitalist, ready to loan out to anybody who's willing to take a risk. And we just saw it's all about the attitude. If you have an attitude where you don't make excuses, just assume that then it can be done, then all the magic happens. So that's our logo, one of our logos on the side there. Can you hold it up, Mataji? See? And turn it that way too. And turn it this way. And then it says around the side, it's announcing the Bhadra campaign, which is Bhadra Purnima is in September, is the day upon which the Srimad Bhagavatam says when you give away a set of Srimad Bhagavatams, then you as the giver get the gift of going back to Godhead. Is that a good idea? Good deal? Say yes. Yes. I need a verbal yes. Like when you sit in the emergency all on a plane, they come by and say, if this plane starts going down, are you willing to work for the airlines and save everybody out the door? No. Verbal yes. They tell you. So it's announcing Bhadra Purnima, and it says 2026 on it because our goal is to get from where we were, which is nowhere, to 100,000 sets of Bhagavatams worldwide by 2026. So judging from the power of this community, and I have a good feel for these things, this is like maybe a 2,000 set potential. All right, 1,000. But you got power here. You got major power, and I look forward to staying in touch. We started a meeting in the office before I came here for an hour and talked about some things that can be done. But I'm very interested in staying connected and just talking to you about ways in which you can do miracles together. Miracles. And it'll happen here, I guarantee you. I'll keep going all night. But I'm so happy I came here, and I thank you very much, everyone. Did I say for you, you could say something about the book. I can't say a word about it, but you can. Just hold it up. Disclaimer, it's not my book. Copyright belongs to BBT. It's a BBT book. Now I'm talking about it. Go ahead. And the points go to the temple too. Your Lakshmi, your points. Unfortunately, I only brought a few books because I toted them over. Pardon me? Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And the gifts here, actually, if you take this down and then give me the bag, I'll just demonstrate what this is. It's kind of a cool thing. I use these all the time. It's an ordinary bag, right? No, wrong. It's got some special feature in it that I really like. It's got this tiny little pocket on the inside, and everything folds up into this pocket, like this. There's a card inside here, so this one's got to be a little lumpy. The card's inside telling you how to fold it up. But I already know, so. So then you have your little bag. You can just carry it with you. Who likes this idea? Well, there you go then. So I have several of these, and I'd like to offer them to you from my heart as gifts. If you could give Maharaj one for me. And if I run out of bags, I'll feel really bad, but I'll make sure that you get more so everybody gets one, okay? Is that all right? Yes. You won't curse me or something like that? All right, so how should we do this? Oh, there's more books in here. See what happens? Okay. All right, I have a few more bags. If a couple of you want to come up, I'll just give you a bag. But if you don't want one, just hang back. Okay. And then we can make a list of how many are left over, how many didn't get a bag, and then I'll send a quantity over. Okay?